Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that you might not think about too much on a day-to-day basis, but it's surprisingly crucial in the business world and just life in general. And that is how we agree. It goes way beyond a simple yes or no. You know, it's a whole language. It's almost like a secret language that can help you unlock success in meetings, in your relationships, and even your career.
It really is fascinating. It's not just about being positive or agreeable. It's really about wielding agreement as a tool.
Hmm.
And we're going to unpack some insights from the source that you sent me pasted text. And it's really going to change the way that you think about navigating agreement entirely.
So it's more than just good vibes then. I'm intrigued. The source mentioned a German manager who made her Japanese client uncomfortable with her enthusiastic agreement style. What happened there?
Well, that's a great example. In some cultures, like in American business settings, you might shout, amazing, or that's awesome. But in Japan, that can be seen as overbearing. Subtle nods and even silence can be much more powerful forms of agreement in Japanese business culture. It's almost like a cultural dance where you need to match your steps with your partner.
Wow. So even if your intentions are good, you can totally misstep. It makes me think about those meetings where you feel like you're just nodding along, not truly contributing. How do we avoid that?
That's a great question. And that's where we start to build bridges, not echo chambers. Imagine, instead of just saying, good idea, you say, I like how you focused on X, but have we considered Y? You're acknowledging their idea, but also adding another layer to the conversation.
Okay, so I'm actively listening, connecting the dots. What about when I really want to show support for an idea? Is there a right way to go all in?
Absolutely. Think of it as having an agreement arsenal.
Yeah.
You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to hang a picture. So for those game-changing ideas, that's when you break out the I couldn't agree more kind of phrases.
Makes sense. Save the big guns for the right moment. But then there are those, everyday meetings where it's more about, showing you're on the same page, not necessarily leading the charge, what works in those situations.
That's when you want to dial it back a bit. Using phrases like, that makes a lot of sense, or I appreciate your perspective. It shows understanding and alignment without being over the top.
So reading the room is key. I'm picturing it like dressing for the occasion. Boardroom meeting versus brainstorming session. You need the right agreement outfit.
Precisely. And just like a mismatched outfit can feel awkward, using the wrong agreement style can create tension and miscommunication, even when everybody actually agrees.
That's so true. This is reminding me of those times when I felt like I'm agreeing too much, almost on autopilot. Is there a danger in that?
Absolutely. I call it agreement fatigue. When you're constantly saying yes, your agreements lose their impact. It's like overusing a word until it becomes meaningless.
So how do I know if I'm falling into that trap? And what's the downside besides sounding like a broken record?
Well, one sign is if you're agreeing without really truly considering the idea. The downside is that you become the yes person. Your opinions carry less weight. And you might even end up supporting things that you don't actually believe in.
Oh, that's a scary thought. So how do we fight agreement fatigue? Is it about disagreeing more?
Not necessarily disagreeing more.
Yeah.
But being more strategic with your silence. Sometimes a thoughtful pause speaks volumes. It shows that you're processing the information, not just jumping on the bandwagon. And when you do agree, it holds more weight.
Okay, so silence can be powerful. Are there other pro moves we can use? What about that power of presence thing I've heard about?
Ah, yes. The power of presence. That's about agreeing even when you're not speaking. Think leaning in eye contact, note-taking. It all shows that you're engaged even before you utter a word.
It's like you're laying the groundwork for your agreement, making it more impactful when you do speak up. Are there times when disagreeing can actually be helpful?
You're on the right track. Strategic disagreement can actually boost your credibility. If you're always agreeing, people might see you as a pushover. But respectfully challenging an idea shows that you're an independent thinker.
So it's about choosing your battles, knowing when to push back a little to show you're not just blindly agreeing.
Exactly. And it's also about the timing of your agreement. I call this agreement positioning. Jumping in with an immediate, I love it, shows enthusiasm. But a well-placed pause before agreeing can convey that you've carefully considered the idea.
So like a good comedian, timing is everything. It adds another layer of strategy. What about taking it a step further? Not just agreeing with what but what could be.
I like that. That's what I call forward-looking agreement. It's about saying, I agree, and this could lead to.
Yeah.
You're connecting the present idea to future possibilities.
Yeah. It's like you're not just agreeing with the idea, you're investing in its potential. This is all really making me rethink how I approach agreement.
It's a subtle but powerful shift.
Yeah.
Now let's add another layer of complexity here. The digital world. How do we translate all of this agreement mastery to virtual meetings where those visual cues are often missing?
That's a great question. Because so much of our work is happening online these days. We'll dive into the digital dimension of agreement right after this. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, it's amazing how even something as simple as agreement can completely change when we move online. It's like we have to learn a whole new set of signals.
It really is. It's like trying to speak a new language. We can't exactly lean in or make eye contact through a screen. So how do we show agreement effectively in virtual meetings?
You got it.
Mm-hmm.
You think about emojis, chat messages, even how you position yourself on camera.
Yeah.
It all becomes part of that digital agreement toolkit.
Okay, let's start with those emojis. Everybody's using them these days. But do they really make a difference when it comes to agreement? Or are they just adding to the noise?
Well, they can be powerful if they're used strategically. Imagine a well-timed thumbs-up emoji right after a colleague makes a strong point. It's like a virtual nod of approval. It shows you're on board without interrupting the flow of the conversation.
Okay, so it's about being intentional, not just spamming the chat with hearts and thumbs.
Exactly. And then there's also what I call layered agreement, which is about combining different digital tools to create a more nuanced message. Let's say someone presents an idea in a virtual meeting. You might react with a thumbs up emoji, then follow up with a supportive comment in the chat, and then later elaborate on your agreement verbally when it's your turn to speak.
I like that. It's like you're building on your agreement, showing different levels of engagement.
You got it. And this is especially important in those mixed mode meetings, where some people are in the room and others are joining virtually. Layered agreement helps to bridge that gap, and it ensures that everyone feels heard and seen.
Speaking of feeling heard, what about those chat boxes that just seem to explode during meetings? It's great to have that real-time feedback, but how do we use the chat effectively to show agreement without adding to the chaos?
The chat box is a great tool, but it definitely requires finesse. It's about being supportive and visible without hijacking the conversation. So instead of just a generic agree, try something like, building on what Sarah said, we could also consider.
Yeah.
You're showing that you're actively listening and contributing to the discussion.
So it's about taking those bridge building skills that we talked about earlier and adapting them to the digital world.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the power of a simple thank you or great point in the chat. Those little acknowledgments can go a long way in making people feel valued, especially in a virtual setting where it's easy to feel invisible.
Yeah, it's almost like you need to be more intentional about expressing agreement online, since those subtle cues that we rely on in person are often missing.
That's right. And it's not just about what you say in the chat, it's also about those nonverbal signals. What I call the digital nod is crucial here. Keep your camera on, make eye contact with the speaker, and use subtle nods or smiles to show that you're present and engaged.
So even though we're not physically in the same room, we can still use our body language to convey agreement and build connection.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about those situations where we're not communicating in real time. Think email threads, project management platforms, anything where we're responding asynchronously. How do we make sure that our agreement comes across clearly and effectively in those settings?
That's a great point, because so much of our work communication happens in writing these days. A simple yes might work for a quick email reply, but when it comes to more complex discussions, we need to be more strategic.
Exactly. Asynchronous agreement is all about clarity, context, and evidence. So let's say you're commenting on a project proposal. Instead of just saying, looks good, you might write something like, I agree with the proposed approach in section 2. The data strongly supports this direction. You're not just agreeing, you're providing rationale. And you're demonstrating your understanding of the proposal.
So it's like we're taking that concept of agreement with evidence and applying it to the written world.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use formatting and visuals to enhance your written agreement. Bullet points, bold text, even emojis. All of that can make your feedback more engaging and easier to digest.
Okay, so we've covered in-person agreement, virtual meetings, and even asynchronous communication. It's amazing to see how many layers there are to something that we often take for granted.
It really is. It's all about being mindful and intentional in every interaction. And now let's take this to the next level and explore how agreement plays out from a leadership perspective.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting because a leader's agreement carries so much weight. It's not just about their personal opinion, it can actually impact an entire team or even an organization.
That's right. And that's exactly what we're going to delve into in the final part of this deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've explored how to, master agreement in all sorts of situations, but now I'm really curious about the leadership angle. Does a boss's yes carry more weight than everyone else's?
It absolutely does. Leaders have this unique power where their agreement isn't just expressing personal opinion. It can launch projects, boost careers, even shape the whole company culture.
So there's a lot more pressure on them to get it right. They can't just throw around awesome to every suggestion that comes their way.
Exactly. It's what I call the leader's agreement paradox.
Right.
They need to be impactful. Their yes should mean something, but they can't support everything. Otherwise, their agreement loses its value, and it can actually lead to scattered priorities or even bad decisions.
Right, it makes sense. So it's not about agreeing more, it's about choosing the right moments and the right intensity. Like, how does a good leader show agreement in a way that empowers their team? Makes people feel trusted to actually do their jobs.
That's where empowerment agreement comes in. Instead of saying, I approve this plan, a leader might say, I trust your judgment, go make it happen. You see, they're not just rubber stamping something, they're conveying confidence in their team's abilities.
Well, that's a subtle but powerful difference. It makes me think about those leaders who are really good at highlighting their team's accomplishments, making sure everyone feels valued. Does agreement play a role there too?
Absolutely. Think of it as the agreement spotlight. Let's say someone in a meeting shares a brilliant idea. The leader could say, that's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need. Great work. They're not just praising the person, they're using their agreement to amplify that contribution, make them shine.
Oh, I see. And it sets a great example for the rest of the team. Showing what kind of contributions are valued. It's really amazing how something as seemingly simple as agreement can be such a powerful leadership tool.
It really is. And let's not forget about the power of silence, even at the leadership level. A well-placed pause before agreeing can speak volumes. It shows that the leader isn't just reacting, they're thoughtfully considering the idea.
Yeah, it's like that silence adds weight to their eventual agreement. Like they're saying, I've heard you, I've thought about it, and I'm on board.
Exactly. And, it can even create a sense of anticipation and importance around their decision. It's a subtle but effective way for leaders to communicate that their agreements are not given lightly.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive. We've gone from those basic yes and no responses to a whole new understanding of how to use agreement strategically in all areas of our professional lives.
It really has been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listener is feeling empowered to use agreement as a tool for communication, for collaboration, and for leadership.
Me too. So the next time you're in a meeting, whether it's in person or online, think about your agreement style. Are you using it intentionally? Are you matching your approach to the situation? Are you building bridges? Empowering others? Highlighting those brilliant contributions? Remember, agreement isn't just about saying yes, it's about shaping the conversation, influencing decisions, and creating a more positive and productive work environment.
And remember, mastering the art of agreement is an ongoing journey. Be curious, experiment, and observe what works best for you in different situations.
That's great advice. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.